In 1776, George Washington, yes, that George Washington, the marble-faced father of American virtue, signed off on the largest counterfeiting operation in colonial history. Not to get rich, not to buy more powdered wigs, but to collapse the British economy from the inside by flooding it with fake pound notes so convincing that even London bankers couldn't tell the difference. The twist? The British were doing the exact same thing to him. Welcome to the Revolutionary War's most profitable battlefield, the printing press, where both sides realized that if you can't win with muskets, you can always win by making the enemy's money worthless. It's 2026 and we're still playing the same game. We've just replaced the hand-cranked presses with Federal Reserve balance sheets. Picture this. It's 1775. The 13 colonies are broke. Not skip lunch to pay rent broke. We're talking no actual treasury, no tax system, and definitely no central bank broke. The Continental Congress has one asset, a printing press and a dream. They start printing Continental Dollars, paper money backed by the vague promise that once they win this war against the most powerful empire on earth, these notes will definitely be worth something. Maybe. Hopefully. At first, it works. Soldiers accept the paper. Merchants take it for gunpowder and grain. The pile of Continental Dollars grows taller than the pile of actual silver in the vault, mostly because there is no vault. There's just paper, and the shared delusion that paper equals value when everyone agrees to pretend together. But here's the problem with shared delusions. They collapse the moment someone prints more paper than the delusion can support. And in 1776, everyone started printing. Enter George Washington, commander of the Continental Army, a man whose face would one day grace the very dollar he was about to systematically destroy. Washington wasn't a financial mastermind. He was a Virginia plantation owner who balanced his accounts with the help of enslaved labor and land speculation. But he understood one thing intuitively. Wars aren't won by heroes. They're won by whoever runs out of money last. By 1776, the British were winning. Not because their generals were brilliant, they weren't, but because they had the Bank of England behind them, a machine that could ship gold across the Atlantic to pay soldiers, buy supplies, and keep the war machine grinding forward. Washington had paper that was already losing value because Congress kept printing more of it to pay for boots, bullets, and the occasional bribe. So Washington did what any desperate general would do. He fought fire with fire. If the British had real money, he'd give them fake money. If he couldn't outfund them, he'd drown them. He authorized a secret counterfeiting operation. The target? British pound notes. The goal? Flood England with so much fake currency that their economy would collapse under the weight of its own inflated money supply. Make every pound note suspicious. Make merchants refuse payment. Make the Bank of England choke on its own printing. It was financial warfare, and it was completely illegal by every standard of civilization at the time, unless you won, in which case it became strategic genius. Here's how the scheme worked. The Continental Congress, with Washington's blessing, set up secret printing operations in multiple locations. They hired engravers, some loyalist defectors, some outright criminals, who knew how to replicate the intricate designs on British currency. Pound notes weren't simple. They had watermarks, detailed engravings, specific paper textures. Counterfeiting them required skill. But the colonies had one advantage. British currency designs were public information. You could walk into any colonial port and examine a real pound note, study it, trace it, reproduce it. The fake pounds were smuggled into British-controlled territories through networks of spies and merchants. Some were handed directly to British soldiers as payment for goods, knowing those soldiers would spend them in London once they rotated home. Others were simply released into circulation in New York, Philadelphia, anywhere the British Army occupied. The plan was elegant. You didn't need to destroy Britain's economy overnight. You just needed to introduce doubt. Once merchants started questioning whether the pound in their hand was real, the whole system seized up. Trust is the only thing holding paper money together. Remove trust, and paper becomes paper again. But here's the mirror Washington didn't see coming. The British were doing the exact same thing to him. The British Crown, through operatives in New York, set up their own counterfeiting presses. Their target? Continental dollars. Their goal? Destroy the American economy before it even existed, and they were better at it. British counterfeit Continentals were so well made that even congressional treasurers couldn't always spot them. They flooded the colonies with fake notes, thousands of them, tens of thousands. By 1779, the Continental Dollar had lost 99% of its value. The phrase "not worth a Continental" entered the American vocabulary as a synonym for completely worthless. Both sides were printing, both sides were counterfeiting, both sides were drowning in paper, and the only winners were the people who understood the game early enough to convert their paper into land, silver, or anything tangible before the deluge. Let's talk about what happens when everyone's holding paper that might be fake, but nobody wants to admit it. In 1778, a loaf of bread in Philadelphia cost $8 in Continental dollars. By 1780, the same loaf cost $225. Not because bread got scarce, because paper got worthless, Congress kept printing. They had no choice. Soldiers needed to be paid, even if that payment was increasingly meaningless. The printing presses ran day and night. The pile of notes grew taller than the pile of goods those notes could buy. Merchants started refusing Continentals altogether. They wanted silver, gold, British pounds, anything except the paper rectangle with a promise from a government that might not exist in 6 months. Washington's soldiers, the ones supposedly fighting for freedom, were being paid in currency so devalued that they couldn't afford food. Some deserted, others mutinied. The ones who stayed did so out of loyalty to the idea of America, not because the paper in their pockets meant anything. Meanwhile, the British counterfeit operation was working beautifully. Every fake Continental they printed was another nail in the coffin of American credit, and the Americans couldn't stop it, because stopping it would require admitting that their own currency was already compromised. It's the same trap every hyperinflation falls into. You can't fix the problem without acknowledging the problem exists. And acknowledging the problem causes panic. So you keep printing, keep pretending, keep stacking paper on top of paper until the whole tower collapses. By 1781, the Continental Dollar was dead. Not officially. Congress didn't declare it worthless. They just stopped printing it, stopped pretending. Let it fade into history like a bad dream. The silence was eerie. One year, everyone's talking about Continentals, arguing over prices, hoarding notes. The next year, nobody mentions them. Merchants burn them, soldiers use them as kindling. The paper that was supposed to buy independence became the wallpaper of a failed experiment. Washington won the war anyway, not with money, but with French gold. The French crown, eager to humiliate Britain, shipped actual silver and gold across the Atlantic to fund the final campaigns. Real money. The kind you could bite and know it was solid. But the damage was done. America's first national currency had collapsed under the weight of its own printing presses. And the British counterfeiting operation that Washington himself had inspired. The irony is almost too perfect. Washington authorized counterfeiting British pounds to destroy their economy. The British retaliated by counterfeiting American dollars. Both succeeded. Both economies were damaged. Both sides learned the same lesson. Paper money is only as strong as the trust behind it, and trust evaporates the moment everyone's printing in secret. Fast forward to 2026. In 2020, the Federal Reserve printed $3 trillion to fight the pandemic recession. In 2021, they printed more. By 2023, the money supply had expanded faster than at any point in modern history. And just like in 1779, people noticed. Inflation spiked. The pile of dollars needed to buy bread became heavier than the bread itself. Gas, rent, eggs, Everything got more expensive, not because things got scarce, but because money got abundant. The Fed insists this isn't the same. They have tools. They have credibility. They have PhD economists running models that prove everything's fine, but the mechanism is identical. Print more currency than the economy can absorb. Watch the value dilute. Watch prices rise. Watch trust erode. Here's the modern counterfeiting twist. Nobody needs to set up secret printing presses anymore. The counterfeiting is legal, and it's called quantitative easing. The Fed creates money from nothing, buys government bonds with it, and calls it monetary policy. It's the same magic trick the Continental Congress used: create paper, declare it valuable, and hope everyone keeps believing. The British counterfeit operation against the Continental Dollar worked because it introduced doubt. Today, that doubt is built into the system. We all know the Fed can print unlimited dollars. We all see the debt clock spinning. We all feel the inflation in our grocery bills. The only difference between 1780 and 2026 is that in 1780, people could switch to British pounds or Spanish silver when Continentals collapsed. Today, when the dollar weakens, where do you go? The euro, which is printed just as freely. The yen, which Japan prints faster than anyone. Cryptocurrency, which went through its own boom-bust cycle and is now just another speculative pile of digital paper. We're all holding Continentals now. We just haven't admitted it yet. George Washington didn't destroy the British economy with his counterfeit pounds. The operation was too small, too late, and the Bank of England had deeper reserves than the colonies could drown. But the British did destroy the Continental Dollar. Their counterfeiting operation, combined with Congress's own overprinting, turned America's first national currency into a joke that lasted generations. The lesson should have been obvious. You can't print your way to prosperity. You can't create value from nothing. You can't fight an economic war by inflating your enemy's currency without inflating your own. But we didn't learn it. We just got better printing presses. Let me tell you what happened to the actual counterfeiters when the war ended. Most of them disappeared. A few were quietly pardoned. Some went back to their old trades, forging land deeds, creating fake letters of credit, the usual grift economy of the 18th century. The skills were transferable. But one group got rewarded. The ones who'd been counterfeiting for the government became respectable. They opened legitimate printing businesses. Some became official engravers for the new United States Mint when it finally launched in 1792. Think about that. The same hands that printed fake British pounds to commit economic warfare were later hired to print real American dollars. The crime became the career. The counterfeiters became the establishment. It's the perfect metaphor for how money actually works. There's no fundamental difference between legitimate currency and counterfeit currency, except who's doing the printing and whether they have an army to back it up. The winners write the history. The winners also write the currency laws. By 1790, the new U.S. government under the Constitution assumed all the old Continental Congress war debts. Well, some of them. Alexander Hamilton, the new Treasury Secretary, created a plan to exchange old Continentals for new government bonds at a fraction of their face value. If you held 100 in Continentals, you might get $2 in bonds. The rich loved this. They'd been buying up worthless Continentals from desperate veterans for pennies on the dollar, betting that eventually the government would honor them. When Hamilton's plan passed, those speculators made fortunes. The soldiers who'd been paid in Continentals and spent them immediately to survive? They got nothing. Same mechanism, different century. The people closest to the printing press always win. The people paid in the printed money always lose. Here's what the Revolutionary War counterfeiting campaign actually accomplished. It didn't destroy the British economy. London barely noticed. The pound remained stable. The Bank of England had enough gold reserves and credibility to absorb the fake notes without collapsing. But it did teach the British a lesson about financial warfare. They refined their techniques. When they fought Napoleon 2 decades later, they unleashed counterfeit francs on France with industrial precision. The French economy wobbled. Napoleon had to recall entire currency issues and redesign them mid-war. The Americans, meanwhile, learned nothing. Or rather, they learned the wrong lesson, that printing money works as long as you win the war. So when the War of 1812 came around, guess what Congress did? Printed more paper currency. Guess what happened? Inflation, collapse, worthless notes. The cycle repeated. We keep fighting the same war. We keep using the same weapon. We keep pretending this time the paper will hold its value because this time we're smarter about it. We're not smarter. We're just better at lying to ourselves. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And the rhyme scheme is print, inflate, collapse, repeat. Subscribe to watch the next verse. If you want to watch history repeat itself in real time, subscribe. Because the printing presses are still running and the paper keeps stacking higher. Not worth a Continental? Just wait until you see what not worth a dollar looks like.